In the spring of 1940, the fate of Europe turned in mere weeks. A nation that had withstood centuries of war, revolution, and empire, France, the heart of continental Europe, collapsed under the weight of a lightning war unlike anything the world had ever seen. The fall of France was not just a military defeat, it was a civilizational shock. In 6 weeks, one of the world's great powers was humbled, its armies scattered, its government in chaos. The surrender at Compiègne, in the same railway carriage where Germany had once admitted defeat in 1918, became a haunting symbol of reversal. What happened in those desperate weeks is a story of courage, betrayal, innovation, and tragedy, a story that reshaped World War II and the modern world. For centuries, France had stood as both shield and sword of Europe. Its armies had marched under Napoleon, its republic had resisted monarchies, and its culture radiated across the globe. Yet by 1940, the wounds of the First World War still ached. Verdun and the Marne were etched into French memory, but so were the millions of dead and the staggering cost of victory. Out of that trauma came the Maginot Line, fortified walls of steel and concrete, intended to make France impregnable. Alongside Britain, France prepared for the possibility of German aggression, but much of its faith rested on the defenses of yesterday. When Hitler's armies turned west in May 1940, the French and their allies still believed the old war would repeat itself: slow advances, trench lines, and a grinding stalemate. Yet the Germans brought something new: Blitzkrieg, the lightning war. Tanks, aircraft, and mechanized infantry worked in terrifying harmony, breaking through defenses and racing deep into enemy territory. The French High Command, still tied to methods of 1918, struggled to comprehend the speed of the assault. The German plan, known as the Manstein Plan, was daring, almost reckless. While Allied forces expected the main thrust through Belgium, the Wehrmacht instead sent armored divisions through the Ardennes, a forested region thought impassable to tanks. Within days, German panzers under generals like Heinz Guderian and Erwin Rommel had broken through near Sedan, racing toward the Channel. The French front lines, stretched thin, collapsed in confusion. One officer later recalled with disbelief, "We had not been beaten in the field, and we had been paralyzed, cut to pieces by speed." As the panzers surged westward, a disaster unfolded for the Allies. The British Expeditionary Force and much of the French First Army were cut off in northern France, trapped near Dunkirk. From May 26 to June 4, in what Winston Churchill would call a miracle of deliverance, over 338,000 British and French soldiers were evacuated across the Channel. Yet while Britain was spared annihilation, France was left gravely exposed. Inside France, panic spread. Refugees clogged the roads, millions fleeing south with carts, bicycles, and whatever they could carry, while German planes strafed the columns. The French government abandoned Paris. In the capital itself, German troops would soon march under the Arc de Triomphe, where French soldiers had once celebrated victory in 1919. Yet not all was chaos. Soldiers still fought with desperate courage. At Ston, French tanks battled the panzers in brutal duels, inflicting heavy losses. In some sectors, French infantry held on fiercely, proving that the defeat was not born of cowardice but of disarray and doctrine. As historian Marc Bloch, who lived through those days, wrote, "Our troops fought bravely, but they were struck down by a new art of war that our leaders had not understood." On June 10, Italy, led by Mussolini, declared war on France, hoping to seize spoils from its weakened neighbor. Days later, German forces entered Paris without resistance. To spare the city from destruction, it was declared an open city, its streets eerily silent as Wehrmacht troops raised the swastika over the Eiffel Tower. The final humiliation came at Compiègne. On June 22, 1940, France formally surrendered to Germany in the same railway carriage where Marshal Foch had dictated terms to a defeated Germany in 1918. Hitler, savoring revenge, sat in Foch's seat as the French delegation signed the armistice. The symbolism was devastating. France was divided. The North and Atlantic coast fell under direct German occupation. The South became Vichy France, a collaborationist state led by Marshal Philippe Pétain, the hero of Verdun, who now told the French people, "It is with a heavy heart that I tell you today we must cease fighting." His decision sparked bitterness and division between those who accepted defeat and those who would resist. But resistance had already begun. From London, General Charles de Gaulle declared that France has lost a battle, but France has not lost the war. His voice, broadcast by the BBC on June 18, called on the French people to continue the struggle, to refuse surrender, and to keep alive the flame of independence. In villages, forests, and cities across France, networks of resistance would grow, laying the foundation for eventual liberation. The fall of France reshaped the war. Britain now stood alone against Nazi Germany, facing the prospect of invasion. The United States, watching from across the Atlantic, realized that European defenses had collapsed far faster than expected. Germany, emboldened, would soon launch the Battle of Britain, while turning east toward the Soviet Union. The balance of power had shifted in ways few had imagined possible at the start of May 1940. In the years that followed, the memory of 1940 haunted France. Collaboration and resistance, defeat and liberation, honor and shame, all were intertwined in the national consciousness. The loss was more than military, it was cultural, political, and psychological. The French people had seen their republic fall in weeks, their government fractured, their society tested. Yet from the ashes, a new determination was born. Today, the fall of France remains a cautionary tale. It reminds us that wars are not fought with the weapons of the last conflict, that complacency can be fatal, and that nations must prepare for change. It is also a story of human endurance, of refugees who walked hundreds of miles, of soldiers who resisted hopeless odds, of ordinary men and women who would keep alive the dream of freedom. The summer of 1940 was not the end of France. It was the beginning of another chapter, one of occupation, collaboration, resistance, and eventual liberation. But for the world, those 6 weeks changed everything. The fall of France was a turning point, a thunderclap that announced a new kind of war. This story you have just heard is the result of careful research, historical records, and a commitment to bringing the past to life. If you value high-quality storytelling that honors history and its lessons, I encourage you to support this work. Together, we keep history alive, not just as memory, but as warning and inspiration for the future.